Hello and welcome to Introducing Extranet Publisher, Part 1 Overview. My name is Peter Carson. I'm going to be your presenter today. A quick agenda. We're going to cover off some terminology, then we'll dive right into what Extranet Publisher is, take you through some case studies, and then talk about product features. So from a terminology point of view, just so everybody understand what a public website is. It's an anonymously available site that you can visit with your browser. You don't need to sign in. There's no authentication required. Typically, it's discoverable by Google and Bing search engines. Versus an extranet, also a website, also available through your browser, but that you need to authenticate to. And it's really a place for you to share information outside of your organization with your customers, your partners, your vendors. And it could be an extension of your public website, a secure portion of your corporate intranet, or a standalone extranet. An extranet publisher really applies in both of those two scenarios. Now within extranets, there's two deeper scenarios. One is the collaborative, the other is the publishing. The collaborative is where you're going to be working on documents together. And SharePoint Online Office 365 actually makes a lot of sense here. It's typically invitation only. You're going to collaborate on some documents, whether they're just uploading, downloading them, or whether they actually have to edit or co-author them with you. It's often very project focused. Extranet Publisher is not targeted at that scenario. It's really targeted to the publishing scenario, where you just want to push content out in a secure way. You want people to be able to download, view information. There may be self-registration as part of that, but it's really a one-way push out. There's limited feedback back. Maybe there's liking and commenting. Maybe there's the ability to upload files, update your profile. But for the most part, it's a push out where you've got a number of content authors that need to securely publish content out to a broader audience. Now, in both public websites and extranets, you may want to think about content management systems. And there's a couple of terms that you're seeing out in the industry right now. This idea of a coupled CMS versus a headless CMS. And I know it gets a little technical here. I'm trying to keep this at the overview level. But a coupled CMS is really saying the content management application, what your content authors use, and the delivery application, what the site visitors use to consume that content, come together in a single application. Think of WordPress, Drupal, Joomla as obvious examples from that point of view. And everything gets managed in that one place, but it's tightly coupled together. The way your site looks and the way you author it is really tightly connected. So it makes it difficult to move to another CMS and to really separate that. Now there is this idea of a decoupled CMS that partially separates that. And they say, let's use one technology for our content management application and a similar connected technology to actually deliver it, but they're not directly connected. Versus a headless CMS, which is really just the content component. The idea here is that content authors focus just on the content itself and the metadata and how it's organized. They don't concern themselves with the presentation layer or how it's going to look when people come visit to it. And the advantage there is that the number of content consumption channels keeps increasing. Think of desktop browser versus mobile, but then expand that into set-top boxes and smartwatches and display boards and lots of different ways you might want to consume that content. Keeping that decoupled through the headless approach allows you to have completely different presentation layers for those different vehicles. So some interesting reading in the article there if you want to have a look deeper into that. Now, Extranet Publisher can work in either the decoupled or the headless scenario. So in the decoupled scenario, yes, we have a .NET Core technology for publishing the website out that can work with Extranet Publisher, or you could build your own presentation layer. You could use Angular, React, any number of different frameworks to build the actual website portion of it and just consume the content from Extranet Publisher. So as I mentioned before, Publisher is really focused on the public website and the publishing extranet models. And the idea is that we use Office 365 or SharePoint Online as the content management application. Publisher pushes that out. And as I mentioned, it could be any number of architectures. And it doesn't need to be the whole website. It could just be a portion of the content. You may want to create the whole website in .NET Core, for example, which is a common scenario that we do. Or maybe you still want to use WordPress for your website, but you just want to have an area of the website consume content from Publisher. Maybe you've got some documents that you want to manage in Office 365 and automate the process of getting those out into your WordPress site. That's absolutely a scenario that Extranet Publisher can support as well. Basically it provides a JSON data feed of the content and the metadata and pushes the document data across as part of that as well. So I may have lost some of you already. Let me just jump over and give you a real world example to make this a little easier to understand. So we're going to dive into a customer case study. And we have a deeper case study. We've got the links up on our site for one of our customers called Ontario MD. And the idea here is that Ontario MD's public website, www.ontariomd.ca, which you can go to, is anonymously available, and it has a secure portion to it as well. So it's kind of a hybrid of the public website and the publishing extranet. The beauty of it, though, is that Ontario MD uses Office 365 as their content authoring environment. So they do all of the content creation, approvals, workflows, everything happens through SharePoint Online in Office 365. When it's ready and marked to be published, the Extranet Publisher picks it up and pushes it over onto an Azure website. So the visitors that are coming from the outside, whether you're hitting it anonymously or you're coming in as an authenticated Extranet user, you're hitting that Azure website. You're not actually coming into SharePoint or Office 365. So it's a nice separation from that point of view. We have complete control over the user experience, the branding, the whole login experience, everything is part of that Azure website. So from a financial result point of view, this was actually a replacement for a previous legacy system built on Oracle. The operating costs of the entire new environment is actually less than just the maintenance fees for the Oracle environment previous. They got to decommission a whole dedicated hosting environment as part of this and spun it all up in Azure as Azure Web Apps. Basically they're paying about $440 per month USD to host that as an Azure App Service. And Microsoft actually takes care of all the care and feeding of that. So there's a significantly less effort involved in managing that. Now, you don't need Extranet Publisher to do this style of thing. I mean, I've given talks where I've shown examples. There's a template available from Microsoft for Flow that will take documents in SharePoint and move them over into Azure Blob storage so that you can then point your website to it. That's a small piece of what Publisher does, but it gives you an idea that if that's all you want to do is move your content from SharePoint into Azure, you can actually do that out of the box using Flow and SharePoint Online in Azure. Now, a number of other example websites, we actually run all of our sites on Publisher as well. So the Extranet User Manager website, our sister company Envision IT, and even my blog site, blog.petercarson.ca, are all built with this technology. So we author all the content in Office 365, and then it gets pushed across into an Azure website from there. So let me take you through a couple of product features, and I'm going to actually use our Extranet User Manager as an example for this. So I've got a number of tabs open in my browser here on the right. Let me take you through some scenarios here. So the tab I've got open right now is actually our public site. So if you go to www.extranetusermanager.com, dig down into our events, and this is actually the last webinar I gave, which was on provisioning of teams, groups, and sites. So we have content here. We've got images, we've got web content, we've got the presentation itself that we want people to be able to see. How do we get that content up into there? Well, we actually use Office 365 to manage this. So I'm actually in a document library in our Office 365 where I can upload, for an example, the presentation for that particular webinar. All of our images are in there, all our page content is in there as well. And then that gets published out to the Azure website. So when somebody clicks on this view presentation, they're not actually going to Office 365, they're just retrieving that document from the site in Azure. Now the page itself is actually managed through there as well. So if I come over here, let's say we want to go into that particular page. Sorry, here we are. You'll see there's a very similar look and feel here because we're not using the headless concept, we're using the decoupled. What we've got here is the ability for a content author to really experience the site, see the same presentation within the SharePoint environment, but they've got the full SharePoint experience. So I can come in here, I can check this page out, I can edit it, I can go through the publishing process and publish that out. And when I mark it as published, maybe we have a flow workflow that goes through the approvals. Once that finishes, that's when Extranet Publisher sees it and actually publishes that page here out to the website. Now the other items in my list here are more technical. I'm actually going to save those for part 2 when we dive under the hood and show you actually how this is working and how this is wired together. So there are some links. We're going to put a copy of the presentation up on the site and want to thank you. If you've got questions, by all means reach out to inquiry@extranetusermanager.com. Stay tuned, part 2 coming up.